Since the dawn of time, humanity has stared into the vast unknown and wondered what if the gods themselves whispered our fates into the wind. What if every civilization, every empire that rose and fell, was guided by invisible hands, weaving destinies as intricate as the stars? Across every culture, every continent, ancient myths speak of divine intervention, of cosmic battles, of prophecies so powerful they bent history itself to their will. These aren't just stories, they're echoes of a truth buried deep in our collective memory, a truth that suggests we've always been part of something far grander than ourselves. Picture this, an oracle in Delphi, trembling as visions of fire and ruin spill from her lips, a scribe in Mesopotamia etching the words of the gods onto clay tablets, certain that the heavens dictated every stroke. A shaman in the Andes deciphering the language of thunder, convinced it held the blueprint of empires yet to come. These aren't mere legends, they're fragments of a puzzle, one that reveals how 30 pivotal myths of divine destiny didn't just shape cultures, they sculpted the very world we live in today. From the whispers of creation to the thunderous climaxes of apocalypse, these tales held the power to unite kingdoms, spark wars, and even alter the course of history itself. And here's the most haunting question of all: what if these myths weren't just stories? What if they were glimpses into a hidden design, a cosmic script where gods and mortals danced together on the stage of fate? Over the next while, we're embarking on a journey, one that will take us from the sun-baked temples of Egypt to the misty forests of Norse legend, unraveling the threads of destiny that bind us all. You'll hear of prophecies so precise they defied coincidence, of heroes who walked the razor's edge between mortal and divine, and of moments when the veil between worlds grew thin enough to touch. This isn't just about the past, it's about the echoes of those myths in our lives today, the whispers of destiny that still rustle in the corners of our modern world. So lean in close, the gods are about to speak. High atop the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air hummed with something older than human memory, the Oracle of Delphi sat in her sacred chamber, a vessel for the voice of Apollo himself. Kings, conquerors, and desperate souls climbed those winding paths with offerings of gold and trembling questions, for her words didn't just predict the future, they shaped it. Take Croesus, the wealthiest man in Lydia, who sent envoys to ask if he should wage war on Persia. The Pythia's reply slithered through the temple smoke: "If you cross the river Hollies, a great empire will fall." Croesus, drunk on certainty, marched to battle only to realize too late that the doomed empire was his own. But how did this priestess, this mortal woman, channel such terrifying clarity? The temple stood atop a fissure in the earth where ethylene gas seeped from the rocks, a narcotic haze that sent her into convulsions, her voice twisting into something not entirely human. Pilgrims described her writhing on a three-legged stool, eyes rolling back as syllables tumbled forth in riddles, each phrase a knife balanced between salvation and ruin. When Athens faced the gargantuan Persian fleet at Salamis, it was Delphi's prophecy, "Trust the wooden walls," that convinced them to stake everything on their ships, birthing a naval victory that saved Greece. Yet the oracle's greatest power wasn't just foresight, it was ambiguity. Her words were like smoke, you saw in them what you wished to see. Cities rose or burned based on interpretations scribbled in panic by priestly intermediaries. Even Alexander the Great, who demanded a prophecy calling him the son of Zeus, left in fury when she addressed him merely as "my child." The lesson: destiny here wasn't a fixed path but a dance, one where human arrogance and divine whims twisted together, where a single phrase could unravel an empire or cradle a civilization in its palm. Every whisper from Delphi's chasm proved that fate wasn't written in stone, but in the spaces between words, waiting to be misread. Beneath the gnarled roots of Yggdrasil, the great world tree that held the cosmos together, three shadowy figures crouched over a loom, their fingers spinning threads not of wool but of human lives. The Vikings called them the Norns, Erd, whose name meant what once was, Verdandi, what is, and Skuld, what shall be. Unlike the Greek fates who snipped mortal lifespans with cold scissors, these sisters worked in a tapestry of endless revision, their hands staining destiny into the bark of the tree itself. Every scratch of their runes echoed through the 9 realms, from Odin's golden hall to the lowest frost giant's lairs. What made these weavers so terrifying wasn't just their power, it was their indifference. When the god Baldur dreamed of his own death, his mother Frigg begged every plant and animal to swear an oath not to harm him. Yet one tiny sprig of mistletoe, deemed too harmless to ask, became the weapon that killed him. The Norns didn't intervene, they didn't gloat, they simply kept carving as if Baldur's tragedy was just another knot in the pattern. Even Ragnarok, the apocalyptic battle where gods would perish and the world drown in fire, wasn't an ending to them, just a frayed edge to be rewoven into whatever came next. Yet here's the twist, the Norns didn't just predict fate, they responded to it. Viking sagas tell of warriors who altered their own threads through sheer will. When the hero Sigurd slew the dragon Fafnir, he bathed in its blood and gained the power to understand birds' warnings, a twist the Norns hadn't fully etched. This is why modern heathens still whisper of weird, that old English cousin of weird, which doesn't mean strange, but that which is becoming. It's the idea that destiny isn't a prison, but a conversation, a tapestry where every choice pulls at the threads around it. So the next time you hear someone say, "It's weird how things worked out," remember, they're unknowingly invoking the Norns. Those sisters still hum in the background of our lives, fingers flickering through every accident, every near miss, every moment the universe seems to whisper, "Pay attention." The difference is now we get to talk back. Deep in the cosmic waters where time itself swirls like milk and honey, a battle raged, not with swords but with a mountain and a serpent. The Hindu myth of Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean, begins with a desperate pact between Devas and Asuras, gods and demons who loathed each other yet needed one thing only teamwork could seize, the nectar of immortality. They coiled the gargantuan serpent Vasuki around Mount Mandara, using his body as a rope to spin the mountain like a churn in the Milky Way's shimmering depths. But this wasn't just a quest for eternal life, it was the universe's first great experiment in balance. As the mountain churned, the ocean spat forth treasures beyond imagining. The wish-fulfilling cow Kamadhenu, the moon clutched in Shiva's hair, even the goddess Lakshmi rising on a lotus. But with each divine gift came poison, the lethal halahala, so toxic it threatened to unravel creation until Shiva drank it, his throat turning blue to save existence. And here's the brilliance of the myth. Every twist mirrors the duality written into reality itself. The gods needed the demons' strength to stir the waters. The demons needed the gods' wisdom to navigate the chaos. Without both forces pulling in tension, the elixir could never surface. Astronomers whisper that the myth might encode ancient observations of our galaxy. The ocean could be the Milky Way, its starry currents resembling churned milk. Mount Mandara, the axis mundi, aligns with Earth's poles, while Vasuki's coils echo the serpentine path of planets. Even the 14 treasures symbolize lunar phases or zodiac constellations, but the deepest truth lies in the ethical dance neither side won. When the nectar finally emerged, the demon Ra, who disguised himself as a god to drink it, only for Vishnu to behead him mid-sip. His immortal head still chases the sun and moon across the sky, causing eclipses in eternal hunger. This is why Samudra Manthan isn't just a story, it's a cosmic blueprint. The ocean is our own unconscious, the churning, the trials that extract wisdom from suffering, the poison, the price of ambition, and the elixir, not just immortality, but the realization that light cannot exist without darkness tugging at its heels. Even today, every human struggle mirrors that primal churn, our greatest treasures always surfacing alongside new poisons we must learn to hold without choking. In the dripping quiet of an English winter, a blade stood embedded not in stone but in an anvil atop it, its hilt glinting with frost and promise. The tale of Arthur pulling Excalibur from this impossible prison wasn't just a test of strength. It was a divine cipher, a puzzle box left by forces older than Britain itself. Geoffrey of Monmouth's 12th century chronicles first whispered of Caliburnus, a sword forged in Avalon's otherworldly fires, but it was Mallory who centuries later painted the scene we know. A boy too young to grow a beard, yanking steel from rock as if destiny itself had greased the hinges. Yet here's the spine-tingling detail most miss the anvil. Medieval metallurgy saw anvils as sacred, the unyielding surface that shaped raw ore into purpose. By wedging the sword between stone and iron, the myth fused earthly and celestial authority. When Arthur freed the blade, he didn't just prove his worthiness, he became a living hinge between worlds, his kingship ratified by the clang of hammer on steel echoing through time. Real history thickens the mystery. In the year 1282, Italian chronicles describe a sword lodged in a block of marble at Montezippi Chapel, a blade claimed by the knight Galgano Guidotti after a vision of the archangel Michael. Carbon dating confirms the weapon's age, and the rock bears marks of medieval tools. Could this have inspired Mallory, or was Galgano's act itself a ripple from older legends of chosen blades? The deeper magic lies in what Excalibur refused to do. In Welsh lore, the sword Dynwen burned unworthy hands, a twist Mallory echoes when Arthur alone draws the blade without hesitation. This wasn't monarchy by bloodline, but by some unfathomable cosmic vetting. Even today, coronation rites whisper of this. The British sovereign still receives a sword during the ceremony, its weight a silent question. Can you bear what the universe demands? So the next time you hear sword in the stone, listen closer. That metallic ring isn't just Arthur's triumph. It's the sound of the divine tipping its hand, of mortal fingers brushing a blueprint they weren't meant to see. And perhaps, if you press your ear to the wind, you'll catch the scrape of steel on rock somewhere, waiting for the next hand bold enough to try. The air over Tenochtitlan hung thick with incense, and dread the day Moctezuma's scouts brought word of pale men riding beasts like mountains, because according to the Aztecs, this moment had been foretold for centuries, etched into the very bones of time. Theirs was a universe perched on the edge of annihilation, a world already scarred by the death of 4 previous suns. Each prior age had ended in cataclysm. Jaguars devouring the first sun, hurricanes sweeping away the second, rain of fire consuming the third, floods drowning the fourth. And now, the fifth sun, the era of movement, ruled by the war god Huitzilopochtli, was doomed to perish in earthquakes unless fed a steady diet of human hearts. This hunger for sacrifice traced back to the god's own self-destruction at Teotihuacan. The legend whispered of 2 deities hurling themselves into a divine bonfire to birth the fifth sun. But the newborn orb hung motionless until all the other gods slit their throats to give it blood strength. That bargain became the template for Aztec existence. Life demanded death, balance required imbalance. Their calendar stone, that massive 24-ton disc now in Mexico City's museum, isn't just a timekeeper, it's a doomsday clock. At its center gapes the face of Tenatia, the current sun god, his tongue a sacrificial knife, his claws clutching human hearts, the 4 squares around him. The previous erased worlds, the glyphs framing the stone, the date the fifth sun would inevitably collapse. So when Cortés arrived in 1519 wearing feathered armor eerily reminiscent of Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent god, exiled long ago with a promise to return from the east, Moctezuma didn't just fear a foreign army. He was staring at what his priests called Nemontemi, the 5 hollow days at the Aztec year's end when the universe unraveled and gods walked among mortals. The Spanish ship's sails mirrored Quetzalcoatl's serpentine cloud banners. Their cannons echoed his thunder weapon. Even the year matched prophecies of cosmic reckoning. In that paralyzed moment of recognition, Moctezuma's hesitation became the hinge of history, not because he was weak, but because he believed resisting Cortés might accelerate the apocalypse his people had spent centuries preparing for. Yet the cruelest twist lay in the Spanish reaction. When friars later translated the calendar stone, they recoiled at its demonic imagery and buried it face down beneath the Zocaloan, where they were literally inverting the Aztec worldview. To the conquered people, this wasn't just humiliation, it was cosmic confirmation. The invaders had unwittingly reenacted the very myth they scorned, playing their assigned role in the Fifth Sun's demise. Today, when tourists touch the stone's weathered carvings, they're not just feeling rock. They're tracing the fingerprints of a civilization that saw its own extinction in the stars and chose to meet it with ritual and trembling grace. When the Zhou dynasty's armies stormed the Shang capital in 1046 BCE, they didn't just bring spears, they brought a revolution wrapped in divine poetry. Their justification for rebellion would echo for millennia. The mandate of heaven, a celestial verdict stating rulers only kept power so long as they governed with virtue. Unlike Europe's static, divine right of kings, this was a contract with exit clauses written in comet tales and peasant uprisings. The Zhou chronicles painted the last Shang king as a monster who made lakes of wine and forests of roasted meat while his people starved, proof heaven had revoked its favor. What made this doctrine so explosive was its flexibility. Natural disasters became celestial report cards, droughts signaled heavenly displeasure, bumper crops confirmed approval. When the first Qin emperor unified China in 221 BCE, he claimed the mandate through sheer administrative competence, standardizing weights, building roads, and defending against northern nomads. Yet within 15 years, his heir's cruelty sparked revolts, proving the mandate could be transferred like a baton in a cosmic relay race. Even the peasant-born founder of the Ming dynasty in 1368 wielded this idea, painting his rise from beggar to emperor as proof virtue trumped noble blood. Compare this to Europe's divine right monarchies, where rebellion was sin and kings supposedly answered only to God. James I of England famously declared rulers were little gods on earth, their authority unshakable until the French Revolution's guillotine said otherwise. But China's mandate created a paradox. It justified overthrow while demanding stability. Rebel leaders had to prove they were restoring harmony, not causing chaos. This explains why even foreign dynasties like the Mongol Yuan framed their rule as heavenly sanctioned order-keeping. When the king fell in 1912 after centuries of Manchu rule, revolutionaries still invoked the mandate's ancient logic, claiming heaven now favored republicanism. The Boxer Rebellion of 1899 revealed the mandate's enduring power. Peasant fighters plastered slogans about assisting the king in fulfilling heaven's will as they attacked foreigners, convinced their cause aligned with cosmic justice. Yet their failure proved the mandate's final evolution. Foreign guns and railroads had become new, heavenly signs no dynasty could ignore. Today, when Beijing speaks of historical inevitability, the ghost of the mandate whispers through those words, a reminder that in Chinese political thought, rulers still dance to a tune only the cosmos can hear. The River Boyne curled like a silver serpent through the emerald hills of ancient Ireland, its waters hiding a secret older than the stones, an impossible salmon, its scales glinting with the knowledge of all things. This was no ordinary fish. The bardic tales whispered it had eaten 9 hazelnuts that fell from the sacred trees of wisdom surrounding Kunla's well, absorbing their power into its flesh. To eat even a bite of this creature was to inherit the universe's secrets, and so the great poet Finnegan spent 7 years stalking its ripples, his nets frayed with patience until the day he finally hauled the shimmering prize onto the banks. But destiny has a way of tripping over mortal plans. As Finnegan roasted the salmon, his young apprentice Fionn Mac Cumhaill, a boy not yet grown into the legend he'd become, touched the blistering skin and burned his thumb. Instinctively, he sucked the wound, and in that heartbeat, the fish's power flooded his veins like lightning. The Druids would later call this Imbasphorusnai, the illuminating knowledge, an eruption of insight so violent it could leave seers mute or mad. Yet Fionn, with the adaptability of youth, simply blinked and understood. The taste of the boin's water in the salmon's flesh, that was the language of rivers. The crackle of the fire, the gossip of flames. From then on, whenever Fionn chewed his thumb in thought, a gesture immortalized in statues across Ireland, he could pluck truths from the air like ripe fruit. Here's where the myth grows roots deeper than folklore. Cynla's Well wasn't just a poetic fancy, it mirrored real Celtic veneration of springs as portals to the otherworld. Archaeologists still find votive offerings in Irish bogs, butter spoons, carved ogham sticks, even entire cauldrons sacrificed to these liminal places. The hazelnut, far from random. Ancient Druids considered them capsules of wisdom, their hard shells guarding soft kernels like cryptic teachings. Europe's oldest surviving recipe from 9th century monks is for bruchon, a porridge of hazelnuts and salmon, a dish that might have once been sacred. But the salmon's journey doesn't end with Fionn. Trace its ripples to Scotland's ferry holes, underground streams where folklore claims salmon gain supernatural knowledge by swimming between worlds. Or to Wales, where the prophet Taliesin's origin mirrors Fionn's, a boy tasting a magical brew meant for another. This isn't coincidence, it's the Celtic mind insisting wisdom can't be stolen, only received, often by accident, always through humility. Even today, when scientists speak of omega-3 fatty acids in salmon boosting brain function, or when poets describe inspiration striking like a fish leaping unexpectedly from water, they're unknowingly echoing a truth those Iron Age Druids carved into myths. That enlightenment doesn't come to those who chase it, but to those prepared to receive its dizzying gift. One night in the 7th century, while Muhammad slept near the Kaaba in Mecca, the Archangel Gabriel arrived with a creature unlike any earthly beast Burak, a dazzling white steed with the face of a woman, wings of an eagle, and hooves that touched the horizon in a single stride. This was the prelude to the Isra and Miraj, a journey that would vault the prophet from the sacred stone of Jerusalem's temple mount to the very throne of God. But this wasn't just a mystical voyage, it was a revelation etched into the architecture of faith, a blueprint of the cosmos that still whispers through Islamic art and Sufi poetry today. The first leap, the Isra, carried Muhammad on Buraks back to Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, a site already heavy with prophetic history, where Solomon's temple once stood and Abraham nearly sacrificed his son. Here, the prophet led prayers with Moses, Jesus, and other messengers in a convergence of divine voices, but the Miraj, the ascent, unfurled like a celestial ladder. Through 7 heavens, Muhammad witnessed wonders, angels sculpting mountains of light, hell's chasms groaning with the weight of sinners, and finally, the Sidrat al-Muntaha, a lote tree marking the boundary of creation. Beyond it lay the divine presence where even Gabriel dared not tread. Every detail of this journey pulses with symbolism. Burak's hybrid form mirrors the bridging of earthly and heavenly realms. The 7 heavens reflect the 7 layers of Islamic cosmology, each governed by a prophet, Adam in the 1st, Jesus in the 4th, Moses in the 6th. The dome of the rock's golden mosaics capture this ascent visually, its geometric patterns spiraling upward as if to guide the eye toward the infinite. Sufi mystics later reinterpreted the Miraj as an allegory for the soul's journey, the nafs or ego, shed at each level like a snake sloughing its skin. But the most revolutionary moment came when God imposed the 5 daily prayers. Initially commanded as 50, Moses intervened, arguing humanity couldn't bear such a burden. The negotiation, dripping with divine mercy, reduced the number while preserving its spiritual weight. This vignette reveals Islam's core tension, the sublime meeting the practical. Even in the throes of cosmic revelation, the prophet advocated for human frailty. Today, when pilgrims touch the rock believed to bear Muhammad's footprint in Jerusalem, or when whirling dervishes spin in imitation of celestial orbits, they're not just reenacting a myth, they're stepping onto a path first illuminated by a winged mare and a prophet who returned from the divine threshold with a message etched in starlight. The Isra and Miraj didn't just ascend through heavens, it mapped the human soul's capacity to reach beyond itself. The ball court echoed with the hollow thud of rubber striking stone as the twins Hunahpu and Exbalanque stepped onto the sacred playing field, a strip of polished floor between two sloping walls that wasn't just a game arena, but a portal to Xibalba, the Mayan underworld. Their opponents, the Death Lords themselves, skeletal figures who ruled the 9 layers of darkness and delighted in tricking mortals into fatal contests. This wasn't mere mythology, it was a celestial drama choreographed by the motion of Venus, the star the Maya called the Great White Shark of the Sky, whose cyclical dance between morning and evening appearances mirrored the twins' descent and rebirth. What made their battle so extraordinary was its layered symbolism. The ball game, known as pits, wasn't just sport, it was cosmic warfare. Players used hips and elbows to drive a heavy rubber ball through stone rings, their movements mirroring the sun's perilous journey through the underworld each night. The stakes: when the twins' father and uncle had previously challenged Xibalba, they failed the gods' deceptive tests, offered cigars that burned endlessly, blades that swung on their own, and were sacrificed, their heads mounted on a gourd tree as warnings. Now Hunahpu and Exbalanque turned the Death Lord's tricks against them. When forced to guard cigars and torches overnight, they tricked fireflies into mimicking flame. When sent to fetch flowers from a razor-filled garden, they enlisted ants to retrieve them. Each trial became a lesson in outwitting inevitability itself. The climax came in the ball game's aftermath. After allowing themselves to be burned and ground into bone dust, the twins resurrected first as fish, then as vagabonds performing miracles. Their final act, convincing the Xibalba lords to sacrifice themselves in a mock resurrection ritual, only to leave them dead forever. This wasn't just victory, it was the ultimate subversion of death's arrogance. Archaeologists see echoes of this myth in real Mayan rituals. At Capon's ball court, carvings show players dressed as the twins, while decapitated heads, likely losers of the game, spurt vines, mirroring the gourd tree of their father's skull. Venus alignments marked these ceremonies, tying earthly games to heavenly cycles. Yet the deepest truth lies in the twins' refusal to stay divine. Unlike other mythic heroes who ascended to godhood, Hunahpu and Exbalanque chose to rise as the sun and moon, eternally cycling between life and death, light and dark. Every time a Mayan king reenacted their ball game, he wasn't just honoring legend, he was stepping into a celestial script where even gods could be outplayed. The next time you watch a basketball arc toward a hoop, remember, you're glimpsing the shadow of a game where mortals once challenged death itself, and for a fleeting moment won. The world plunged into chaos the day Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess, sealed herself inside a cave, a celestial tantrum that left the heavens barren and the earth gasping for light. According to Japan's oldest chronicles, the Kojiki, this catastrophe began with her brother Susanoo, the storm god, whose jealousy spiraled into destruction. He hurled a flayed horse through her sacred weaving hall, tore apart her rice fields, and defiled her temples until Amaterasu, wounded by his betrayal, retreated into the cavern of Ama-no-Iwato. The darkness wasn't just absence, it was hunger. Crops withered, spirits wailed, even the gods grew desperate. But here's where the myth becomes more than folklore. Amaterasu's withdrawal mirrors real volcanic winters, like the one triggered by Mount Samalas's eruption in 1257, which cast the globe into a decade of cold so severe it altered history. The Kojiki might encode ancestral memory of such events, the sun vanishing behind ash clouds, leaving humanity to interpret it as divine fury. Modern scholars note that the cave's location, near Japan's volcanic Kyushu region, strengthens this link. The god's solution to Amaterasu's absence reveals Shinto's core philosophy. They didn't beg or threaten, they lured. Placing a mirror forged by celestial smiths outside the cave, they staged a raucous celebration. The goddess Usium danced atop a drum, her laughter infectious, her robes slipping until the other deities roared with delight. Curiosity prickling, Amaterasu cracked the cave's entrance, just enough to glimpse her own dazzling reflection in the mirror. In that heartbeat, the world reignited. This mirror, the Yota no Kagami, wasn't mere prop. It became one of Japan's imperial regalia, symbolizing the truth that divinity resides in clarity, not dogma. Unlike Western myths where gods demand obedience, Amaterasu returned because joy, not fear, drew her out. Even today, Shinto shrines place mirrors in sanctums not as idols, but as portals for worshippers to confront their own inner light. The cave myth endures because it's not about a petulant goddess, it's about how darkness, whether volcanic or spiritual, can only be dispelled by recognizing the brilliance we already carry within. High in the gnarled branches of the world tree, where the winds carried whispers between realms, stood a deity with three faces gazing in opposite directions: Triglav, the Slavic lord of the triple cosmos. His white head scanned the heavens, his black head peered into the underworld, and his central face, gilded like harvest wheat, watched over the mortal plane. This wasn't just a god, it was a living map of existence itself, a reminder that every oak root delving into darkness and every eagle's flight toward the sun existed within his sight. The brilliance of Triglav's trinity emerged in how Slavs wove him into daily life. Farmers left offerings at triple-forked trees, seeing in their branches an echo of his dominion. Warriors carved his symbol, three interlocking triangles, onto shields, believing it channeled his all-seeing protection. Even the placement of his great temple at Wallen, perched between river, forest, and sea, mirrored his balance of realms. But the most haunting ritual occurred during eclipses, when priests would lead processions with three black horses, each representing one of Triglav's aspects. If the beast stumbled, it signaled imbalance in the cosmos requiring sacrifice. Christian missionaries faced an unexpected challenge when they encountered this triune deity. Instead of erasing Triglav, they split him, mapping his benevolent aspects onto St. Nicholas, who inherited the white face's kindness while demonizing the black face as Satan. The gold-faced mediator that became Christ himself, this theological alchemy left traces still visible today. In Poland, St. Nicholas is sometimes depicted with three mitres stacked like Triglav's heads. Bulgarian folk charms invoke Saint Three-Headed to heal illnesses, blending pagan and Christian magic into something older than either tradition. Underneath it all thrived a philosophy far ahead of its time. Triglav's three realms weren't hierarchical like Greek Olympus or Christian heaven. They were interdependent. A 12th century chronicle describes Slavic priests teaching that no realm may thrive while another starves, a doctrine echoing modern ecology. When drought struck, they didn't just pray to sky gods, they made offerings to underworld spirits guarding groundwater. This holistic vision resurfaces in surprising places, from Russian fairy tales where heroes bargain with all three realms simultaneously, to contemporary Slavic pagans who see Triglav not as a fossilized myth, but as a blueprint for living in balance with seen and unseen worlds. The next time you hear a storm rumble overhead, watch how it stirs the earth and shakes the roots below nature's own three-faced dance. Triglav's legacy lingers in those moments, whispering that true power lies not in conquering realms, but in honoring their sacred entanglement. The scales of the afterlife trembled under the weight of a single human heart as Ani, a scribe from Thebes, stood before Osiris in the Duat, Egypt's shadowy underworld. His fate hinged on a feather, not just any feather, but the pristine plume of Maat, goddess of truth and cosmic order, whose emblem was lighter than a breath yet heavier than any lie. This was the ultimate divine audit, captured in spell 125 of the Book of the Dead, a text so vital Egyptians called it the chapters of coming forth by day. But here's the twist: Ani's papyrus wasn't just a spiritual guide. It was a tactical manual crammed with loopholes and verbal traps to outwit the 42 assessor gods waiting to condemn him. Watch closely as Ani's heart, placed on the golden scale by Anubis, threatens to sink the balance. The monstrous Ammit, part lion, part hippo, part crocodile, drools nearby, ready to devour unworthy souls. Then Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe god, steps in not to record the truth but to alter it, because Ani's scroll contains the ultimate hack, a denial speech where he lists every sin he didn't commit. I have not stolen, I have not cursed the gods, I have not blocked floodwaters. Each negation acts like a shield, deflecting judgment even if he'd done the opposite in life. Some versions went further, instructing the deceased to bribe Osiris with promises of offerings from living relatives. Osiris himself, enthroned in his hall of turquoise and lapis lazuli, holds the deeper secret. His green skin isn't just decay, it's the lush rebirth of the Nile's floodwaters, proof that death in Egypt wasn't an end but a transformation. Farmers recognized this in their fields, barren silt turning emerald with sprouting grain, mirroring Osiris' resurrection from dismembered god to ruler of eternity. When priests painted green faces on mummies, they weren't just honoring Osiris, they were activating Heka, the magic that turned words in a scroll into reality. Modern CT scans of mummies reveal how literal this belief was. Some corpses had golden tongues inserted to sweeten their plea before Osiris, while others had stone scarabs placed over their hearts carved with spell 30b. Do not stand against me in judgment. Even the placement of these charms matched the book's diagrams, proving these weren't metaphors, they were engineering specs for the soul, the most chilling discovery. Some wealthy elites had negative confessions written inside their bandages, pressed against the skin like hidden cheat sheets for the ultimate exam. Yet the ceremony's true genius lay in its psychological precision. By requiring the deceased to speak their innocence, it forced a lifetime of reflection. Imagine an Egyptian official reciting, "I have not taken bribes," while remembering the silver he pocketed. The ritual weaponized guilt itself as a moral compass. Today, when we see courtroom oaths or final confessions, we're glimpsing fragments of that ancient balance between justice and mercy, between what we've done and what we desperately hope to become. Before time had name or shape, two primordial waters swirled in the void: Apsu, the sweet male waters beneath the earth, and Tiamat, the salt female waters of chaos, whose serpentine body birthed all creation. The Babylonian Enuma Elish, etched onto 7 clay tablets in the 12th century BCE, begins with a love story turned to war. When their rowdy divine offspring disturbed Apsu's rest, he plotted to destroy them only for the clever god E to strike first, slaying Apsu and claiming his dominion over the deep. But this victory awakened a far greater terror. Tiamat, once the nurturing mother of all, now forged an army of monsters to avenge her mate, her very body contorting into weapons. Enter Marduk, E's son, a storm god so radiant even the other deities trembled at his presence. They struck a bargain. If he defeated Tiamat, they would crown him king of all gods. What followed wasn't just a battle, but the first cosmic blueprint for order conquering chaos. Marduk rode into the fray with 4 winds as chariot horses, a net woven from the constellations, and a bow strung with the Milky Way. When Tiamat opened her maw to swallow him whole, he hurled the Imhalu, a divine wind, down her throat, bloating her until he could pierce her heart with arrows. Then, in a move that rewrote creation itself, he split her carcass like a clamshell. Half became the vault of heaven, the other the earth's foundations. Her weeping eyes birthed the Tigris and Euphrates, her tail became the Milky Way, and her slaughtered monster children became the constellations' eternal prisoners in the sky. The echoes of this chaos camp, the chaos combat motif, resound through history. The Canaanite Baal battling sea god Yam, the Norse Thor fishing for the world serpent Jörmungandr, even Yahweh's taming of Leviathan in Job and Psalms all follow Marduk's playbook. But the Enuma Elish goes further, embedding psychology into mythology. Tiamat's transformation from creator to destroyer mirrors how societies demonize the other during crises, while Marduk's rise reflects how civilizations justify their dominance as divine mandate. When he establishes Babylon as the navel of the world and demands temples in his honor, the text isn't just myth, it's political propaganda, cementing Babylon's supremacy under Hammurabi's code. Modern psychologists see Tiamat and Marduk's duel encoded in our brains. The limbic system raw, emotional Tiamat constantly clashes with the prefrontal cortex rational, ordering Marduk, each needing the other to function. Jungians interpret the myth as the ego's struggle to structure unconscious chaos, while chaos theorists cite it as early intuition about entropy's constant tug against human systems. Even the 7 tablets mirror the 7 days of Genesis, where another god parts waters to forge order. Yet here's the twist: the Enuma Elish ends not with rest, but with Marduk fashioning humans from the blood of Tiamat's general Kingu, a reminder that we're literally made from the residue of that ancient war, destined to forever balance creation and destruction within ourselves. The next time you feel torn between impulse and reason, between turmoil and control, remember, you're reliving a battle first imagined by poets gazing at the stars over Babylon, where the first gods proved that order isn't the absence of chaos, but the art of weaving it into something sacred. The Andes still shiver with the memory of Viracocha's footsteps, not the booming stride of a conqueror, but the measured pace of a teacher tracing civilization's blueprint across the raw earth. According to Inca legends, after a great flood erased the world's first people, this bearded deity emerged from Lake Titicaca's sapphire waters near the ruins of Tiwanaku. His skin pale as moonlight, his robes foreign to the highlands, he carried no weapons, only knowledge. With a touch, he softened stone until it flowed like clay, raising terraces and temples that seemed to grow from the mountains themselves. He taught men to weave quinoa fields across impossible slopes, to read the stars as planting calendars, and to channel glacial melt into aqueducts singing with mathematics. Then, as abruptly as he appeared, Viracocha walked westward into the Pacific, promising to return in an age of chaos. Centuries later, when Francisco Pizarro's conquistadors stumbled ashore in 1532, their bearded faces and strange garb sent shockwaves through the empire. Atahualpa's spies reportedly whispered that Viracocha had kept his word, though the Spaniards' greed for gold and penchant for violence soon shattered that illusion. The tragic irony: Viracocha's prophecies may have woven the very noose that strangled the Inca. His predicted return, entangled with the solar god Inti's calendar cycles, left rulers hesitant to attack these divine interlopers until it was too late. Archaeology paints an even stranger backdrop. The pre-Inca Tiwanaku site, where Viracocha supposedly first stepped ashore, boasts monoliths carved with bearded figures unlike any indigenous Andeans. Some scholars speculate these depict ancient visitors from across the Pacific, perhaps Polynesian navigators or even storm-lost Asians whose technology inspired godhood. Others note Tiwanaku's eerie resemblance to flood myths worldwide. Its artificially raised hills mirroring Noah's Ararat, its submerged temples echoing Atlantis. The site's alignment with solstice sunrises suggests the bearded one wasn't just a bringer of tools but of celestial wisdom. Modern Andeans still leave offerings at Viracocha's supposed departure point near Manta, Ecuador. Fishermen speak of a spectral figure walking the waves during storms, not threatening but watching. Whether memory of an actual migrant sage or a metaphor for civilization's dawn, Viracocha's legacy endures in the terraces still clinging to Andes slopes, in Quechua farmers reading clouds as their ancestors did, in the unshakable belief that wisdom wears many faces and that one day the teacher will return to see what his students have built. In the bustling markets of Lagos and the candlelit shrines of Havana, the same ritual unfolds: 16 palm kernels tossed onto a wooden tray, their dance revealing messages from Orunmila, the Yoruba god of wisdom who watched creation unfold from the heavens. This isn't mere fortune-telling, it's a celestial algorithm encoded in nuts and verses, a system so precise it birthed religions across oceans. When an Ifá priest shakes the opal chain or casts the Ikin nuts, they're not predicting the future. They're consulting a living database of thousands of poetic Odu, each a branching path of advice forged by centuries of diviners. Oren Miller's genius lies in his duality. Unlike all-knowing deities, he chose to experience mortality, incarnating as a sage who walked among humans, learning their struggles firsthand. This empathy permeates Ifá divination. A client might ask about love or business, and the priest, guided by the nuts configuration, retrieves an Odu like Ogbyaku, a verse comparing life to a marketplace where patience outturns haste. But here's the twist. The same Odu could prescribe a farmer to plant yams late or a king to delay war, proving Oren Miller's wisdom adapts like water to its vessel. When enslaved Yoruba carried Ifá to the Americas, it merged with Catholicism in startling ways. Oren Miller became syncretized with Saint Francis in Cuba's Santeria, his verses hidden in rosary beads. In Brazil's Candomblé, the Babalorixos still chant Odus over coconut shells, their rhythm mirroring the Atlantic's waves that once separated them from Isle Ife, the Yoruba spiritual homeland. Modern neurologists marvel at how Ifá priests enter trances with mathematical precision, their brain scans showing patterns akin to deep meditation, suggesting centuries of ritual honed a mental technology for accessing intuition. The most profound lesson, Oren Miller refused to be worshipped directly. Instead, he gifted humans the tools to decode destiny themselves. Today, when a Miami mechanic consults a Santero about his failing car, or a Dakar student seeks exam guidance through Ikin, they're partaking in a system that treats fate not as fixed, but as a dialogue where every cast of the nuts is a whispered conversation with the divine. The wind howled through the peaks of the Himalayas. The night Gesar of Ling was born, not as a mewling infant, but as a radiant child already clutching a sword in one fist and a Buddhist scripture in the other. His mother, the Princess Dizeden, had dreamed of swallowing golden light from the heavens, and now the god's prophecy unfurled across the Tibetan plateau. This boy would unite warring clans and purge the land of demons. But this was no ordinary hero's tale. The Gesar epic, a sprawling oral tradition longer than Homer's Iliad and Odyssey combined, weaves history, shamanism, and celestial intervention into a tapestry where every victory carries the weight of karma. What sets Gesar apart is his divine pragmatism. Unlike other mythic saviors who rely on brute strength, he defeats his first demon, the shape-shifting Lutzen, not with weapons but by tricking him into a gambling match. When the demon transforms into a whirlwind, Gesar sicks a pack of enchanted dogs on him. When Lutzen becomes a boulder, Gesar smears it with yak butter so his horse can kick it to dust. This blend of cunning and compassion threads through every version of the epic, from the Mongolian steppes to Bhutan's hidden valleys. In the Eastern Tibetan variant, Gesar even spares a demon child, raising him as his own, a radical act suggesting evil isn't inherent but a distortion to be healed. Nowhere does the epic's spiritual core shine brighter than in the Baal, the hidden valleys Gesar seals with magic to shelter future generations. Bhutanese storytellers describe these sanctuaries as literal landscapes, lush gorges invisible to outsiders, but also as internal refuges. To enter, one must recite Gesar's mantra and possess a mind clear as mountain air. Modern climbers swear they've glimpsed these valleys in the mist-shrouded folds of the Himalayas, their GPS devices spinning wildly as if reality itself warps there. The most startling parallel emerges in Mongolia, where Gesar, known as Kesar, fights not just physical demons, but the inner demons of greed and ignorance. A 13th century manuscript depicts him meditating atop a defeated demon's corpse, transforming its malice into a cushion for enlightenment. This mirrors Tibetan Buddhist practices where wrathful deities like Vajrakilaya aren't symbols of destruction, but of cutting through illusion. Even the epic structure reflects this. Gesar's battles grow less bloody as he ages, his later victories achieved through diplomacy or spiritual insight. Today, the epic lives in unexpected ways. Tibetan nomads play Gesar's ballads on horse-head fiddles to bless new tents, while in Chengdu studios, animators reinterpret him as a superhero battling modern corruption. When an earthquake devastated Yushu in 2010, survivors recounted visions of a blue-clad warrior, Gesar's signature color, lifting rubble to free trapped children. Whether psychological archetype or lingering presence, the king's legacy endures because he embodies a truth older than the mountains. That light isn't the absence of darkness, but the courage to face it with humor, wisdom, and an open heart. The ocean stretched endless under the stars when Maui, the greatest trickster the Pacific ever knew, slipped into his brother's fishing canoe unseen. They'd refused to take him, this smallest and cleverest of siblings, so he hid beneath the hull's planks until they were too far from shore to turn back. With a sigh, his brothers relented only for Maui to unveil his jawbone fishhook, carved from the spine of his grandmother and humming with mana. The line plunged deep, deeper than any net could reach, until Maui felt the tug of something colossal. "Pull," he shouted as his muscles strained. What surfaced wasn't a fish, but land itself, the North Island of Aotearoa, known to the Maori as Te Ika e Maui, Maui's fish. Its jagged mountains still mirror the hook's curve, and Wellington Harbor, that's where the barb tore free. But Maui's celestial mischief didn't stop there. When days rushed by too quickly for his people to finish their work, he wove ropes from his sister's hair and lassoed the sun itself atop Halekola, the house of the sun. The bargain he struck, "Slow your flight across the sky, and I'll release you," etched itself into the rhythms of Polynesian life. Even now, Hawaiian farmers time crops by the sun's lazy arc over that sacred peak. And fire, hidden by the ali bird to keep it from humans, Maui tricked the creature into revealing its secret by pinching its beak until it screamed. The resulting flames still dance in Imu earth ovens, where pork slow roasts under banana leaves. Every twist of these stories knots into Polynesian survival science. Maui's hook wasn't just a tool, it was a navigation metaphor. Hawaiians named the scorpion constellation Kamakau Nui o Maui, Maui's big hook, using its curve to point toward undiscovered islands. Tattooists echoed this in Moko designs, inking fishhooks onto warriors' thighs to grant Maui's strength. When Cook's crew first saw Tahitian canoes in 1767, they marveled at how sailors read waves like road maps, unknowingly witnessing Maui's legacy. His fishing wasn't myth, it was a celestial GPS, teaching that land isn't found by chance, but by reading the stars tug on the soul. Modern voyagers still whisper Maui's name when their hocular canoes slice through swells guided only by starlight. The hook's shape appears in hotel logos and highway signs, but its true power lingers in the way Pacific children are taught to see islands not as fixed dots, but as Maui's catch still bobbing gently on the ocean's line, waiting to be reeled in anew. The firelight flickered in the temple of Istaka as the Magi whispered of the coming Saoirse, the one who would rise when the world grew rotten, wielding the wrath of Ahura Mazda to purge creation of deceit. Zoroastrian prophecies spoke not of one Messiah, but three, each born from a virgin who bathed in a lake where Zoroaster's own seed had been preserved for this sacred purpose. The first, named Hushadar, would arrive when metal coins replaced barter, bringing 30 years of miracles. The second, Hushadama, would come as swords replaced spears, ruling for 60 years of golden harvest. But the third, Astvatiretta, would stride forth when falsehood choked the earth like a serpent, his birth heralded by comets and quakes. This final savior wouldn't just preach, he'd resurrect. Every soul, from the dust of kings to the ashes of murderers, would reassemble in their bones for the last judgment, as molten metal flowed across the world, testing purity like a refiner's crucible. What set this apocalyptic vision apart was its radical justice. Unlike flood myths where the wicked simply drown, Zoroastrian eschatology demanded accountability. The resurrected would walk through rivers of molten metal, the righteous feeling only warm milk, the wicked screaming as their sins burned away. Even the demon Ahriman and his hordes would be purified, not annihilated, until all existence returned to its original perfection. This idea of universal resurrection electrified neighboring cultures. Jewish captives in Babylon carried echoes of it home, where it blossomed into the Book of Daniel's, "Many who sleep in the dust shall awake." Early Christians grafted it onto Jesus' promise of the dead rising like wheat from the earth. Yet the Saoshyant myth wasn't just about endings, it shaped history in real time. When Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, he didn't just free the Jews, he presented himself as a proto-Saoshyant, a king anointed by Ahura Mazda to restore divine order. The Cyrus Cylinder, often called history's first human rights charter, borrows Zoroastrian rhetoric of battling chaos. Modern Tehran streets still bear murals of Cyrus clutching a royal orb alongside Zoroaster's winged Fravaha symbol, a fusion of nationalism and menism. Archaeology reveals how deeply these ideas penetrated. Near Persepolis, a carving shows a figure, possibly Cyrus, emerging from a disc with rays around his head, reminiscent of later Christian halos. Even the Magi who visited Jesus' birthplace may have been Zoroastrian priests tracking astrological signs of the Saoshyant's arrival. Today, as Parsi communities in Mumbai keep sacred fires burning after 13 centuries, they whisper a startling twist. The final savior might not be a man at all, but a collective awakening, each person bearing a spark of that coming light. In a world teetering between fire and redemption, the Saoshyant's promise endures, that no night, no matter how long, escapes the dawn's patient hunger. No jewels adorned her neck, no robes cloaked her shoulders when Inanna, Queen of Heaven, pounded on the gates of the underworld, only raw defiance and a plan to conquer death itself. The Sumerian descent of Inanna, etched onto clay tablets 4,000 years ago, unfolds like no other myth. This wasn't a heroic quest or tragic abduction, but a calculated gamble by a goddess who stripped herself of power at each of the underworld's 7 gates, surrendering her lapis lazuli rod, her breastplate, even her dignity, until she stood naked before her sister Ereshkigal, Queen of the Dead. What happened next? A corpse hung on a hook for 3 days until a deal was struck using the oldest currency in existence, substitution. The genius of this myth lies in its brutal symmetry. Inanna descends during the dry season when Mesopotamia's fields lay barren, her death mirroring the earth's infertility. The 7 items she surrenders, each tied to her divine domains of love, war, and sovereignty, aren't just ornaments but the very codes of civilization. When her minister Ninchuba races to enlist the god's help, only Enki, god of wisdom, responds by crafting 2 genderless beings from the dirt beneath his fingernails. These Gala Chura and Kurjara infiltrate the underworld not with force, but with empathy, mirroring Ereshkigal's agony until she releases Inanna's corpse. But resurrection demands balance. Someone must take her place. The choice of Dumuzi, Inanna's neglectful shepherd king consort, reveals the myth's subversive edge. Even gods must pay for their choices. Compare this to Ishtar's later Babylonian version, where the goddess storms the underworld threatening to raise the dead to devour the living. The tone shifts from psychological ordeal to apocalyptic tantrum, yet the core remains: fertility deities must die to renew. The Greek Persephone myth softens this further, framing her abduction by Hades as a mother's tragedy. But Inanna's story refuses such neat emotions. Her resurrection isn't triumphant. It's transactional, echoing real Sumerian tax documents where substitutes took on debts for the wealthy. Excavations at York reveal how literal this belief was. Temple priestesses reenacted the descent annually, with one woman playing Inanna's stripped, entombed body while others wailed like professional mourners at actual funerals. Cuneiform tablets detail how Dumuzi's half-year underworld sentence dictated the Mesopotamian calendar, shepherds driving flocks to high pastures as summer's heat mimicked his flight from demonic bailiffs. Modern Iraqis still celebrate Akitu, the spring festival where Inanna's return once heralded the Tigris floodwaters. The difference: today's celebrants unknowingly walk the same streets where processions once carried statues of a goddess who proved even divinity isn't immune to consequence, and that sometimes rebirth begins with surrender. The wasteland stretched before Percival like a mirror of his own spiritual blindness, a kingdom rotting from the center out, its rivers sluggish with silt, its fields yielding only thorns. At its heart sat the Fisher King, ruler of the Grail Castle, whose unhealing wound in the thigh festered in eerie synchrony with his land's decay. Medieval poets called it a lance strike from a battle long past, but the older Welsh Peregia tales whisper something darker, a divine punishment for failing to ask the right question when the Grail first passed before him. This wasn't just physical suffering. It was the unraveling of a sacred contract between king and land, a motif echoing back to Celtic sovereignty goddesses who bestowed rulership only on those worthy to touch their bodies, themselves embodiments of the earth. Dig beneath the Christian veneer of Grail romances, and you'll find the ghost of figures like the Irish Flidais, a goddess whose sexual union with kings ensured fertile herds, or the Welsh Rhiannon, whose rejection cursed Pryderi's kingdom with sterility. The Fisher King's thigh wound, often coded as a euphemism for groin injury, mirrors these goddesses' power to withhold fertility when betrayed. Cratien de Troyes' unfinished Percival hints at this when the Grail procession includes not just a chalice, but a silver platter bearing a bleeding lance, an unmistakable pairing of feminine and masculine symbols. The king's impotence becomes the land's famine, his unanswered question a failure of sacred dialogue. Carl Jung recognized this wound as the wounded healer archetype centuries later, the idea that true wisdom comes not from perfection but from grappling with one's fractures. His patient Wolfgang Pauli, the physicist haunted by dreams of a wounded king, inspired Jung's theory that nuclear scientists' guilt over atomic weapons mirrored the Grail Keeper's torment. Modern ecologists unknowingly echo this when speaking of sick rivers or wounded forests, framing environmental collapse as a metaphysical injury requiring more than technical fixes. The Grail's most subversive secret: it wasn't the cup that healed the Fisher King, it was Percival's belated question: whom does the Grail serve? This flipped the script from passive observation to active responsibility. In the Welsh version, the restored king doesn't ascend to heaven like Arthur. He retires to a hermitage, his wound now a wisdom scar. The land greens again, not because a magic object fixed it, but because someone finally dared to ask what it needed. Today, when we speak of healing broken systems from climate to politics, we're stumbling toward that same realization that the real Grail isn't some external solution, but the courage to see our own hand in both wounding and mending. The hammer of the blacksmith god Ilmarinen rang through the endless northern nights as he forged something never before seen in the world, a device so miraculous it blurred the line between magic and machine. This was the Sampo, the glittering centerpiece of Finland's Kalevala epic, a mythical artifact that ground out not just grain but salt, gold, and unending prosperity. Its lid spun like the heavens, its pillars stood firm as the world tree, and its very existence became the obsession of warriors, witches, and gods. But beneath the poetry of Elias Lönnrot's 19th century compilation lies a puzzle. Was the Sampo merely a fairy tale treasure, or a distorted memory of something far older? Listen closely to its description: a many-colored lid that resembled the northern lights, a mill of fortune that required no human toil. Scholars now speculate this could echo Neolithic quern stones, those early grinding tools that revolutionized agriculture. The Kalevala describes the Sampo's theft by the sorcerer Lauhai, who carried it to her island fortress of Pohjola, only for the heroes Väinämöinen and Ilmarinen to pursue her in a ship made from loom parts. During the chaotic battle, the Sampo shattered, its pieces sinking into the sea, yet even these fragments retained power. One piece washed ashore to bless Finland's crops, while another became the fire at the world's core. The Arctic context adds startling layers. Among the Sami people, stories tell of the Siegi, sacred stones that acted as conduits between worlds. Siberian shamans described a cosmic pillar, sometimes imagined as a giant mill, around which the heavens turned. Even the Norse Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, shares linguistic roots with mill, hinting at a pan-Baltic belief in sacred rotating objects. When Ilmarinen sings charms to bring the Sampo to life, his incantations mirror actual Bronze Age metallurgy spells found on Scandinavian runestones. But the most haunting parallel emerges in Finland's landscape itself. Near Lake Ladoga, archaeologists uncovered a 3,000-year-old stone slab carved with spiral patterns eerily resembling the Kalevala's description of the Sampo's lid. Local folklore claims the slab once ground out luck until invaders destroyed it. Whether the Sampo was a metaphor for trade networks that brought grain to the Arctic, a lost technology like the Antikythera mechanism, or simply the human yearning for abundance, its legacy lingers. Modern Finnish factories bear its name, and every time a combine harvester rolls through the midnight sun, somewhere an old farmer might still whisper that the Sampo's broken pieces are spinning beneath their feet. Coyote crouched low in the shadows, his belly pressed to the cold earth as he watched the fire beings dance around their precious flame. Across Native America, from the redwood forests of California to the rolling plains of Idaho, this trickster's theft of fire unfolds in 100 different ways, each version a masterclass in how myth adapts to teach what the land demands. The Cherokee tell of fire guarded by evil yellow jackets in a hollow tree, until Coyote lets the other animals singe their tails carrying embers to safety. The Nez Perce spin a tale where he tricks the 3 selfish firekeepers by disguising himself as a shivering old man, then rolls their stolen coals across the land in a tangle of dry grass. But it's the Miwok story from California that cuts deepest. Coyote doesn't just steal fire here, he shatters it against rocks, scattering sparks that become the first manzanita bushes, whose twisted branches still burn hotter than any other wood when wildfires come. These aren't just bedtime stories, they're survival manuals written in smoke. The Cherokee version encodes fire ecology principles. Their yellow jackets represent the dangers of uncontrolled blazes, while the singed tails of squirrels and raccoons explain why some animals have dark markings. When Nez Perce elders describe Coyote rolling the fire bundle, they're illustrating how wind spreads embers across dry grasslands, a warning against careless handling of flame. Modern firefighters in Yosemite still study Miwok tales, recognizing how the manzanita's adaptation to thrive after burns mirrors Coyote's chaotic gift. Tribal historians note these stories were traditionally told during controlled burn seasons, reinforcing practical lessons through narrative. The real magic lies in how each tribe shaped the myth to their landscape. Cherokee country's dense forests made fire a tool to be carefully contained, hence the sealed tree trunk. For the Nez Perce, whose Coma's meadows required regular burning to prevent woody encroachment, fire becomes something to share. Coyote's deception highlights the sin of hoarding ecological knowledge. But the Miwok, living in fire-adapted chaparral where burns were inevitable, depict fire as an elemental force that could never truly be owned, only redistributed. Modern climate scientists call this pyrodiversity, the way healthy ecosystems depend on varied fire patterns. Coyote knew it centuries earlier when he smashed that burning bundle, ensuring some groves would burn hot while others smoldered low. Next time you see a wildfire on the news, watch closely. The way flames skip across ridges or cling to certain trees, that's Coyote's chaos at work, the same zigzag path he ran when carrying his stolen prize. The old stories say he laughed as he ran, not because he didn't care, but because he understood what humans often forget. fire isn't good or evil. It simply is, and our job isn't to control it, but to learn its language, just as the animals in those myths learned to read the smoke. The golden chariot of Jamshid streaked across the sky like a second sun, its gem-encrusted wheels turning not on earth but on the backs of spirits pressed into service. The Shahnameh, Persia's epic book of kings, remembers this ruler not just as a man, but as a solar deity in mortal flesh. A being so exalted, he commanded demons to build him a flying throne that could circle the world in a single day. His reign stretched 7 centuries, an era when no one died, when wine flowed without intoxicating, when even the lowliest subject glowed with health. But here's the twist that echoes through every Persian New Year celebration to this day. Jamshid's greatest strength became his fatal flaw. The moment he declared himself a god, the throne's magic failed, sending him crashing to earth as his own people revolted. That throne wasn't just a vehicle, it was a cosmic contract. Ancient Zoroastrian texts describe it as a exwara, a divine halo of kingship that could vanish if misused. The demons binding it together, they represented raw natural forces harnessed through sacred knowledge, like the Azatas who guided winds and rivers. When Jamshid's hubris broke that pact, the throne didn't just fall. It shattered, scattering jewels that became the first spring flowers. Modern Noor-as celebrants placing hyacinths on their haft-sin tables are unknowingly recreating those very fragments. The flying throne's legacy spirals far beyond Persia. Some scholars trace the Arabian flying carpet legends back to Jamshid's chariot, noting how Sufi mystics later envisioned prayer rugs as vessels for spiritual ascent. In Armenia, the myth morphed into King Artavasd's eternal imprisonment inside Mount Ararat, his chains forged from the wreckage of a similar sky chariot. Even the Bible's Tower of Babel shares DNA with this story, both warn of celestial ambition punished by fragmentation, but the most startling evidence comes from archaeology. Near Persepolis, a carved staircase shows Jamshid enthroned not on demons, but on representatives of 28 nations, an early vision of global governance. His solar crown resembles Bronze Age disc chariots found in Siberian kurgans, suggesting the myth may encode ancestral memories of prehistoric sun cults. When modern Iranians jump over bonfires during Chahashamsari, the Wednesday before Nowruz, they're reenacting Jamshid's fall and rebirth, the flames both destroying the old year's arrogance and lighting the way for humility's return. The lesson etched into this myth isn't about rejecting power, but wielding it as a steward rather than a tyrant. Every March, when millions gather at the Tadrish Bazaar to buy goldfish for their Nowruz tables, symbols of life's fragility, they're acknowledging what Jamshid forgot, that even the highest throne is only as stable as the ground it ultimately rests upon. The demons didn't abandon him because he flew too high, but because he stopped listening to the earth beneath his feet. The stone walls of the Kimberley region still hum with the presence of those who came before, not ancestors of flesh and blood, but the Wandjina, the towering cloud spirits who shaped the world in the Dreamtime and then painted their own faces onto the rocks as a covenant with the living. These aren't mere artworks. To the Wunumbal, Ungaranian, and Warora peoples, the Wandjina figures with their halos of storm clouds and eerie lack of mouths are living entities. Their power so potent that repainting their images every monsoon season isn't maintenance, it's ritual resuscitation, ensuring the rain's return. What makes the Wandjina unlike any other ancestral beings is their fusion of form and function. Their massive, owl-like eyes aren't just artistic style, they're storm sensors, said to flash lightning when displeased. The radiating lines around their heads, not decorative halos, but literal depictions of cyclonic energy, capturing the spiraling winds that bring the wet season's life-giving deluges. And that missing mouth, taboos forbid painting it because, as Elder David Moljolai explained, the Wandjina don't need speech when they open their mouths, floods come. This silencing isn't restriction, it's reverence for forces beyond human articulation. modern meteorologists have stumbled upon eerie correlations between Wandjina art and weather patterns. Some cave sites cluster along routes where tropical cyclones frequently make landfall, their painted figures positioned like ancient storm trackers. The Wandjina's layered bands of color often match the barometric pressure sequences preceding monsoon bursts, suggesting generations of climate observation encoded in ochre. Even the repainting tradition aligns with El Niño cycles during droughts. Ceremonies intensify, as if the paintings themselves are pressure systems willing the skies to break. But the Wandjina's true revelation lies in their duality. They aren't just bringers of rain, they're enforcers of ecological law. Rock art sites show Wandjina striking down wrongdoers with floods, a warning system as precise as modern disaster alerts. When Cyclone Ingrid devastated the Kimberley in 2005, elders saw not climate change but Wandjina punishing sacred site vandalism. Yet they also appear cradling infants or teaching hunting reminders that these forces aren't arbitrary but bound to reciprocity. Just as the Wandjina gave the first didgeridoo and fire drills, they demand stewardship in return. Nowhere is this covenant more vivid than at Ngawudu Mitchell Plateau, where Wandjina paintings fade and reappear with groundwater shifts. Scientists expected the pigments to degrade, but spectral imaging reveals the minerals themselves responding to aquifer levels, darkening during wet seasons as if drinking the returning rains. The Wandjina don't just predict monsoons, they participate in them, their stone faces acting as conduits between the seen and unseen. To stand before these images during the build-up season is to witness myth merging with meteorology. The air crackles with the same tension as the painting's storm rings, a reminder that in this ancient dialogue between earth and sky, the Wandjina aren't just art. They're the original weather map, written in a language of wind and pigment that modern science is only beginning to decipher. Before the stars had names and the earth knew its shape, Sophia Wisdom herself gazed into the abyss and made a choice that would fracture creation. In the secret scriptures of the ancient Gnostics, buried beneath Nag Hammadi's sands for 16 centuries, her story unfolds with the terrible beauty of a cosmic accident. Unlike other creator deities who shaped worlds with deliberate hands, Sophia acted without permission from the ultimate divine, her longing to understand the unknowable birthing not light, but a twisted shadow, the demiurge. This blundering offspring, ignorant of his own origins, then cobbled together our material world like a child molding mud, believing himself the one true God. And thus, according to the Gnostic Gospels, the prison of flesh and stone was born from a goddess's stumble. What makes Sophia's fall so haunting is its intimacy. This wasn't the rebellion of Lucifer or the wrath of Zeus, but an error born from love's overreach. The Apocryphon of John describes her reaching for the ineffable light of the Father, only to spill part of herself into the void. That spill became Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, whose arrogant declaration, "There is no God but me," echoes ironically through Exodus. Early Christian heresiologists like Irenaeus raged against this myth, recognizing its subversion. If the world was created by mistake, then every earthly power structure was suspect. The implications ignited radical movements from the Carpocratians, who shared all possessions and spouses to reject material attachments, to the medieval Cathars, who refused marriage and meat, seeing procreation as trapping more souls in the demiurge's flawed creation. Yet Sophia's legacy transcends heresy. Her name means wisdom in Greek, linking her to the biblical figure in Proverbs who says, "The Lord created me at the beginning of his work." Kabbalists later reimagined her as the Shekinah, God's exiled feminine presence. Alchemists encoded her in their sacred feminine Mercury, the volatile spirit that transforms base matter. Even the Renaissance's occult philosopher Jacob Boehme wrote of Sophia as divine intuition, a mirror through which God contemplates himself. Modern echoes resonate in everything from Jung's anima archetype to the Gaia hypothesis, where Earth itself becomes a self-regulating wisdom goddess. The most provocative twist lies in contemporary feminism's reclaiming of Sophia. Where Gnostics saw her fall as tragedy, thinkers like theologian Rosemary Radford rather frame it as necessary rupture the moment wisdom, tired of passive contemplation, dared to create, however imperfectly. Artist Judy Chicago placed her at the dinner party's table. Singer Tori Amos wove her into lyrics about female divinity. Unlike Athena, born from Zeus's skull fully formed, Sophia's wisdom comes stained with failure, making her profoundly relatable. Every time someone questions whether life has deeper meaning beyond society's imposed structures, they unknowingly walk the path she first carved through the dark, a reminder that even errors made in love can birth new ways of seeing. Perhaps the Gnostics' greatest insight was that Sophia never abandoned her creation. Though her overreach birthed the prison, her light still glimmers in human consciousness, the divine spark trapped in matter. When contemplatives seek truth beyond dogma, when artists channel visions they don't fully understand, they mirror Sophia's original, reckless reach toward the infinite. The world may have begun in a mistake, but redemption lies not in escaping matter, but in recognizing the wisdom that fell with us. Each nightfall, Saulė, the Lithuanian sun goddess, harnesses her chariot of molten gold and begins her desperate flight eastward, not to rest, but to outrun the iron wolves of darkness snapping at her heels. Unlike the orderly Greek Helios steering a measured course, Saulė's journey is a harrowing chase, her path fraying at the edges as the wolves' tear strips from her copper skirts, their teeth screeching against her wheels. This isn't just poetry, it's celestial physics rendered in myth. Those stolen fragments, they become the crimson streaks of dawn, the goddess shedding light like armor plating to escape. The wolves themselves are no ordinary beasts. Forged by the trickster god Calvalis, their iron bodies embody the Baltic people's reverence for blacksmiths as shapers of cosmic order. Folklore insists their howls sync with the northern winds, a sound so piercing it cracks weak trees, an eerie parallel to solar wind disturbances modern scientists measure during geomagnetic storms. On the winter solstice, when the wolves come perilously close to overtaking Saulė, villagers lit bonfires not just for warmth, but as mock suns to distract the pack. The fire's smoke coiled into the sky like protective runes, buying the goddess precious moments to regain her lead. Eclipses held even darker magic. When the moon god Menules, Saulė's wayward husband, swallowed her light, it wasn't just celestial mechanics to the Balts, it was a domestic betrayal with global consequences. The moon steals sun. Myths describe Menules as a jealous spouse, his darkened face reflecting shame as people banged pots and shot arrows skyward to startle him into coughing her up. Archaeologists have unearthed Iron Age Baltic arrowheads deliberately bent into spirals, possibly ritual objects meant to snare the moon during eclipses. Even Saulė's daughters, the Saulė's Ductries, played their part. These stellar maidens were said to weave her a new gown daily from amber and dew, reinforcing the sun's fragility against eternal night. The goddess's chariot wheels left their mark on the earth itself, sacred stones dotting the Lithuanian countryside like the famed Puntukas boulder, bear carvings of spoked wheels, not mere decorations but portals for Saulė's energy. During midsummer's Rosso's festival, maidens rolled flaming wheels downhill, their spinning rims mirroring the sun's desperate arc. Modern pagans still thread amber beads onto red threads, recreating the net Saulė casts each autumn to gather strength for winter's gauntlet. What makes Saulė's myth endure isn't its drama, but its defiance. Unlike solar deities who command their domains, she struggles. Her light never guaranteed, her victory daily earned. When a storm darkens the sky, Lithuanians whisper that the wolves have caught her cloak. When dawn breaks after a long winter night, it's not inevitable, it's Saulė outsmarting darkness once more. In an age of satellites and heliophysics, her chase reminds us that light isn't passive. It's a verb, a fight, a wheel forever spinning on the edge of wolf's teeth. The mist still clings to the slopes of Mount Tibik like a living thing when the Korean origin myth begins, not with a bang, but with a bear's patient vigil in a cave. Legend claims Hwanung, son of the celestial lord Hwanin, descended to this mountain with 3 heavenly seals and a divine mandate to govern. But it wasn't a warrior or philosopher who would become Korea's progenitor. It was a female bear who endured 100 days in darkness, eating only mugwort and garlic, transforming into a woman to bear Dangun, the first king of Gojoseon in 2333 BCE. This potent blend of shamanism and sovereignty myths paints a startling portrait of civilization's birth, not through conquest but through sacrifice and metamorphosis. Archaeology lends eerie credence to the tale. Bronze Age petroglyphs near Ulsan depict bears standing upright like humans, while Neolithic bear teeth pendants found in shell mounds suggest totemic worship. The mugwort and garlic diet, traditional Korean medicine, still prescribes them for purification, mirroring the bear's ritual cleansing. Even the 3 heavenly seals find echoes in jade insignia excavated from 3rd century BCE royal tombs, their carved constellations matching descriptions of Hwanung's celestial tools. Yet Dangun's legacy fractures along the modern peninsula's ideological fault lines. In South Korea, his myth unites. The Foundation Day of Gojoseon is celebrated as National Foundation Day each October 3rd, with ceremonies at shrines like Seoul's Jongmyo. But in the north, the story took a surreal twist when Kim Il-sung allegedly discovered Dangun's tomb in 1993 near Pyongyang. State media broadcast images of a 5,000-year-old skeleton said to be the demigod king, complete with a reconstructed face eerily resembling Kim himself. This political appropriation reveals the myth's malleable power. Where Southern scholars emphasize Dangun as a symbol of ethnic unity, Northern propaganda reframed him as proto-socialist, his bear mother reinterpreted as an early revolutionary enduring hardship for collective good. The tomb itself, whether ancient or constructed, became a pilgrimage site where North Korean schoolchildren learn that their current leaders are Dangun's spiritual successors. The deeper magic lies in the bear's gender. Unlike most Foundation myths featuring male conquerors, Korea's origin hinges on a female animal's perseverance, a motif preserved in Jeju Island's shamanic rituals where women channel bear spirits during gut ceremonies. Modern feminists point to this as evidence of Korea's lost matriarchal roots, while traditionalists see it as proof that true strength comes from endurance rather than aggression. Every autumn, when mugwort sprouts yellow flowers across Korean hillsides, it's hard not to glimpse the shadow of that primordial cave, not as a relic, but as a living reminder that sometimes the fiercest revolutions begin not with roars but with quiet hunger in the dark. Beneath the red rocks of Arizona, where the sky stretches endless and the earth holds its breath, the Hopi people whisper of 4 worlds stacked like layers in a canyon. Each one a failed experiment in human existence, each collapse foretold by the hum of sacred ants. Their emergence myth begins not with a creator's grand gesture, but with a desperate climb. Generations of beings ascending through subterranean realms, guided by the very insects who understand the delicate balance of survival. In the first world, Teowa the creator breathed life into humanity, but conflict over resources shattered harmony. The second world drowned in floods when people forgot reverence for nature. The third collapsed in fire and war when tribes turned on one another. Now we walk the fourth world, its fate trembling in the hands of choices we make today. The ants, those tiny architects of endurance, are the unsung heroes of this journey. Hopi elders speak of Onu Sinum, the ant people, who taught survival during the transitions between worlds. When chaos reigned above, humans retreated into anthills, learning from colonies that store just enough, waste nothing, and work as one. Petroglyphs near Ore depict these insect guides with human-like figures crouching beside them, a visual echo of the Hopi's deepest warning. Civilization's longevity depends on mimicking creatures who live within their means. Modern ecologists gasp at the precision of this metaphor. Ants manage fungal farms, engineer ventilation systems, and even practice waste recycling, all behaviors we now recognize as keys to sustainability. Kachina spirits, those masked messengers who dance between realms, carry prophecies carved from this ancient wisdom. The blue star Kachina's promised return, said to herald the end of the fourth world, isn't vengeful apocalypse but a cosmic report card. When factories choke the air and rivers run toxic, when the earth shakes in Koyaanisqatsi life out of balance, the Kachinas withdraw their blessings. The most chilling prophecy, that the fifth world's birth hinges on a simple question: will humanity finally listen to the ants? Hopi farmers still leave offerings at anthills, watching the insects' movements for drought warnings. Their cornfields follow terraced patterns mirroring underground tunnels, where moisture is preserved like a secret. Scientists now study these methods, stunned by how Hopi maize thrives with 12 inches of annual rainfall where industrial farms fail with 20. The myth's brilliance lies in its refusal to villainize progress. It merely asks that we carry the wisdom of collapsed worlds forward. Those petroglyphs aren't just art, they're contingency plans etched in stone, reminding us that survival isn't about dominating nature, but learning its rhythm well enough to hum along. The desert winds howled like restless spirits as Alexander the Great trudged through the endless sands of Libya, his army crumbling under the sun's wrath. His destination wasn't a city or battlefield, but a tiny oasis shrined the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa, where Egyptian priests whispered truths even pharaohs feared to hear. What happened there in 331 BCE wasn't just a consultation, it was history's most audacious PR stunt, a masterclass in crafting divinity from dust and desperation. Alexander didn't stumble upon Siwa by chance. The oracle had lured rulers for centuries with its eerie accuracy, its priests fluent in the ambiguous poetry of power. But where others sought guidance, Alexander sought transformation. Plutarch recounts how the conqueror entered alone, emerging with eyes blazing, announcing Ammon had confirmed his true parentage not as Philip of Macedon's son, but as the god's own heir. The genius wasn't in the claim itself, but in its delivery. By having Egyptian priests, not his Greek subjects, declare his divinity, Alexander sidestepped Hellenic skepticism. The Siwa narrative gave him something no battlefield victory could: cosmic legitimacy transcending culture. Archaeology reveals the mechanics behind the miracle. The temple's layout forced petitioners through a narrow, echoing corridor before reaching the inner sanctum, where hidden passages allowed priests to stage supernatural effects. Alexander likely heard his divine proclamation through acoustic tricks, the god's voice emerging from stone itself. The conqueror's coinage tells the rest of the story. Post-Siwa issues show him sporting Ammon's ram horns, a visual meme spreading his god-king status faster than gossip. Yet the real revolution lay in the precedent. Ptolemy, Alexander's general turned pharaoh, would later enshrine this tactic, building the Serapeum to blend Greek and Egyptian worship. Rome absorbed the playbook wholesale. Caesar's posthumous deification, Augustus' divine lineage claims, all traced back to that sweltering day in Siwa. Even Christianity's later struggles with the nature of Christ echoed these early experiments in merging mortal authority with celestial endorsement. Modern leaders still channel Alexander's ghost. Political rallies with teleprompter revelations, carefully staged photo ops at religious sites, these are Siwa's descendants. The difference: Alexander's audience half believed the magic. Today's oracle is the algorithm, and every viral moment is a whispered prophecy waiting to be interpreted. The next time you see a leader framed by symbolic architecture or bathed in flattering light, remember, you're witnessing a 3,000-year-old trick, first perfected where the desert meets the divine. The night sky over Babylon burned with celestial omens in the year 7 BCE, when the planets Jupiter and Saturn danced through the constellation Pisces in a rare triple conjunction. an event so mathematically precise that Babylonian astrologers inscribed its prediction on cuneiform tablets centuries before it occurred. Could this be the origin of the Magi's legendary star? Scholars poring over the Venus tablet of Amaterasu, a 7th century BCE Babylonian eclipse tracker, discovered these ancient astronomers could calculate planetary motions with error margins of mere hours. For priest astrologers scanning the heavens from ziggurat rooftops, Jupiter's regal glide meeting Saturn's summer orbit in the fish-shaped constellation would have screamed one message: a divine king is coming to the west. But here's where the astronomical detective work gets fascinating. Chinese records from March 10 BCE describe a broom star with a tail likely Halley's Comet blazing across the sky around the same time. Roman historian Phlegon documented an eerie daytime star in Judea in 4 BCE, possibly a supernova. Kepler himself, in 1604, reconstructed the heavens and proposed a once innate 100 years alignment of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars as the true inspiration. The brilliance of the Magi story lies in how it mirrors actual astrological practices. Persian Magush priests interpreted Jupiter as the king planet. Saturn represented Judea in their zodiac charts, and Pisces symbolized the land of the last sun, a perfect trifecta pointing toward Bethlehem. The Magi's journey may encode deeper scientific history. The star moving before them could describe Jupiter's retrograde motion, where planets seem to halt and reverse course, an effect caused by Earth's orbit overtaking them. Clay tablets from Sippar reveal Babylonians tracked these loops as divine signals. Matthew's description of the star stopping over Jesus' birthplace aligns eerily with Jupiter entering its stationary point on December 25, 2 BCE, as calculated by modern planetarium software. Yet symbolism gleams brighter than astronomy for some theologians. Early Christian writers like Origen saw the star as a miraculous creation, not a natural phenomenon, a beacon that could hover like the pillar of fire guiding the Israelites. The Protovangelium of James, an apocryphal text, describes it descending to inspect the infant like a sentient entity. Giotto's fresco of the Nativity enshrined this view by painting Halley's Comet, which he'd witnessed in 1301, as a golden streak personally dispatched by heaven. Perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from an unexpected source, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among the Essene community's astrological texts lies a horoscope for the King of the Jews, based on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. These ascetic scribes, contemporaries of Herod, were obsessively tracking messianic astrology in real time, when the Magi arrived asking, "Where is he born?" They weren't following whims, they were reading the same celestial script revered from Babylon to Qumran. The Christmas star endures because it straddles the line between provable astronomy and unprovable wonder, reminding us that sometimes the most enduring truths shine brightest when balanced between fact and faith. From the trembling lips of oracles to the blood-stained scales of the underworld, these 30 myths carve a startling pattern across civilization's destiny is never a straight line, but a negotiation. Every culture, whether under Delphi's shadow or beneath Yggdrasil's roots, framed fate as a fragile bargain between mortal courage and divine whim. The Fisher King's wound festered until the right question was asked. The Sampo's broken fragment still spun fortune from the sea. Maui's stolen fire scattered not just embers but choices, each spark a chance to burn wisely or recklessly. What unites these stories isn't just their spectacle, but their insistence that destiny demands participation. The gods don't merely decree, they test. Time doesn't just pass its spirals, offering the same lessons in different guises. The Aztec Fifth Sun dies unless fed with sacrifice. The Hopi Fifth World survives only if we heed the ants. Even the Saoshyant, Zoroastrianism's Messiah, requires human collaboration to ignite the final reckoning. So is destiny written in stars, stone, and sacred contracts. Or are these myths humanity's way of coding survival strategies into narrative ancient algorithms for navigating chaos? Perhaps both. When Gesar outsmarts demons with laughter or Sophia's stumble births creation itself, they whisper the same secret. The future isn't a locked door, but a loom. Every thread, every choice, every question left unasked or answered too boldly shifts the pattern. Now it's your turn. Which myth lingers in your bones like an old song half remembered? The one where Coyote steals fire or where Inanna barters her crown for wisdom? Share your favorite tale in the comments, because the greatest magic these stories ever wrought wasn't controlling fate, but reminding us we're all still speaking its language.